Welcome to the One Hand at a Time podcast. I'm your host, Chris Welton, and I have a special guest for you guys today. I tell you what, this is going to be a super inspirational conversation. Make sure you got your notepad ready. Make sure you're ready to go because we are going to just drop some major bombs on you today. My man David is on here with us today, and he's known as the Fierce Empathy Coach. Like the first thing when I first introduced to you, I read that. I'm like, okay, I got it. Like instantly, we got to unpack that. That's got to be the first thing that we do. So the Fierce Empathy Coach. I find myself as a very empathetic person, but I don't know if I'm fierce and empathetic. So let's just jump right in and unpack that, man.
Yeah, Chris, man, it's an honor to be here. So we'll just go straight into the concept itself. And so fierce empathy by nature, it's a bit of a juxtaposition, right? It's two words that don't really seem to go together. They're almost like, it's like a paradox. These things, one is very aggressive. One is, it conjures up visualizations of like a fierce warrior. There's that aggression that is violent to some degree. And then empathy tends to have more of a nurturing, kind, soft-hearted, genteel, connotation to it. And so what I discovered about myself, some of my natural gifts, anytime I've taken a strengths test, personality test, all those, everything about me is incredibly relational. I love to be with people. I love getting kneecap to kneecap. I love getting to hear people's story. And one of the things that I found is whether it's nature or nurture, I have I have an overabundance of empathy, and there's a lot of negatives that can come with that. There's a lot of really challenging things if you are too empathetic and you care too much, right? And what I started to realize over the years is that just being empathetic, number one, it did not actively serve people well in every situation. It also was very, very, very detrimental to myself, to my family, to my health. And there were so many different components that over the years, I started to realize that, yes, every one of us wants to feel seen, heard, and understood. We want to feel known. We want to feel loved. We want to feel approved. We want to feel accepted. But the people that we actually respect the most, and I thought about this for myself, the people that I respect the most, and I'm sure there are people listening, it's like how grandma used to be. Grandma used to love you to death, but she would call it like she saw it. She would tell you exactly what you did not want to hear. And I realized, man, that's love. That's real love, is creating an environment where people feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard, loved, understood, but simultaneously is that you got the balls to speak the hard truth in love, regardless of what outcome may occur. And I think a lot of people lack the courage to do that. And I know that I did for the majority of my life because I was just trying to, keep the peace and be a people pleaser and make people feel better, but it didn't actually help in the way that I was hoping to help.
So I want to unpack that a little bit. Let's go back to, my friend Rene Rodriguez says that in our lives between the ages of 9 and 13, we can go back and we can see we either had a lighthouse or we had a foghorn. Lighthouse is somebody we looked up to and we're like, oh my gosh, like that's the person I want to be. Or we had that foghorn and we're like, I don't want to be anything like that. So can you go back to your childhood with those ages and realize that's the reason you felt the way you did?
Yeah. So there was a lot, man, that growing up, I'm a Midwestern Kansas farm boy at heart. I grew up in the Midwest. My dad was a hard worker. He was an entrepreneur. He owned his own veterinary practice. My mom was a teacher. And so I grew up with an understanding that if you're going to succeed in life, right, you got to work really, really, really hard. You got to just work hard. You put in the work. And I understood that. But one of the things that was really challenging for me is when I went to graduate high school, Chris, I had worked my butt off. I mean, every single club, all the sports, good grades, trying to do everything I could to set myself up for this American dream is what everybody said. It's like, you got to go to school, you got to get a good degree, and you got to land a good job and make it, right? And so when I graduated, man, I was just different from everyone that was around me. I naturally had friends that were years older than me. I didn't like the people that were my age that were doing stupid stuff and dating in high school and all these things. Like I felt like a weirdo, man. I felt like I was out of place. I was like, this isn't life. Like I want to get to life. Like I want to get there. I want to live and experience and create and do some incredible things. And so for me, the models that I started looking at when I was younger were really just from reading. I became obsessed with reading, which I honestly attribute to my parents. I remember as a kid, instead of having an allowance, we could earn commissions by one of two things. For every 2 hours I would spend either reading or outside, I would earn either money or video game time. And now for a kid, he just wants to play like Nintendo 64, right? Sega or PlayStation eventually came out. I fell in love with nature, and I fell in love with being immersed in books. And over the years, I started realizing there's a big difference between fiction and nonfiction. And so I started picking up nonfiction books, and that's where I really started to learn about success. I learned about success in different areas and how it's not just money. How you can look at someone who's tremendously successful in marriage, but they're extraordinarily unhealthy. You can look at someone that's got the body of a Greek god and they don't have two pennies to rub together. And I started really wanting to understand, how can you create a life that is not just one filled with success, but that's also tremendously fulfilling. And so I kind of marched to the beat of my own drum, and I decided to walk away from a full ride academic scholarship. I turned it down. I decided to go into a leadership development program, a 2-year internship program that kind of set me on my path to building a career in corporate. I was actually on my way to becoming a pastor and decided, that's probably not the right path for me. I do pastor people, and I love that. And my wife and I are still very involved in our church. But for me, I went into the corporate world, man, and it took all of about 7-8 years before I found myself looking at myself in the mirror with a Glock to my head, ready to end my life. I didn't realize that all this stuff that I was reading and consuming, and the models that my parents had set, and what, this whole go get a good job, make 6 figures, get the glass corner office, get a company car, buy the house, get married, have the kid, it was not going to create what I wanted to create. And so for me, it was really this complete dismantling of my entire worldview. And those years of 9 to kind of 13, I think you said, those were very, very tumultuous years for me, because my parents picked us up from Kansas. We moved to Florida, to suburbia. I had culture shock. Everything was different. My childhood was Opie Taylor, bro. Like, I grew up with fish and pull on one arm, a BB gun on the other. Till you move to Florida suburbia and you can stick your hand out the window and touch your neighbor. It was everything. My world got flipped upside down. And so for me, what I realized in retrospect is that those years, they were really, especially all the way through high school into my early 20s and even into my mid 20s, I didn't have any idea of who I was, what I wanted, who I wanted to become, what success really meant, what fulfillment really looked like. And a lot of that stemmed from the fact the reason my parents had moved is because their marriage was falling apart. And so those teenage years, early teenage years, I really learned to wear all the masks. I learned how to be the people pleaser. I learned how to make everybody like me. I learned how to be the nice guy. I learned how to manipulate. I learned how to get what I wanted. And it led to basically a decade plus of what I call the dark ages, until I woke up and realized, okay, there's a lot of useful things I've learned here, but I am destroying my life because I'm just trying to make everybody happy all the time and be the nice, empathetic guy.
I understand that. I actually just left my corporate job August 31st.
Wow.
I just
Congrats,
left my full-time
dude.
corporate job August 31st. Because I wanted to impact more people's lives. I felt I'd impacted the amount of people I could in this. And I did have the nice glass corner office, and I was a chief sales officer for a very good sized company, and did my own thing there. But I wanted to do more. So I totally connect with that. When you decided that the corporate position wasn't your thing, and it caused you to have these suicide thoughts and everything else, how did you get yourself back to center, or who was responsible for helping you get there? I mean, usually that's not a journey we go on by ourselves. I mean, you sound like you're a very faith-based person, so I'm sure there was some faith involved, but who else helped you get back to center?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. I want to encourage anyone, if you're near that point or you've been to that point, or you should be aware that this is not stuff that we can navigate on our own. And many of us, especially men, have been conditioned like we were taught growing up. I think the majority of us, we were taught not what a man is, but what a man is not, and what a man shouldn't do, and what a man's not allowed to do, instead of what a man really is. And that's where, for me, not just as a man, but just as a leader, as a husband, as a father, as wanting to lean into entrepreneurship and to build my own thing, same as you. And ironically, we share that sales background, man. That's exactly the same position that I left. Is I realized that if I was going to make the changes that I needed to make, I needed to have someone that saw from a different perspective, because my perspective had not served me well. My perspective had not created the results that I wanted. Now, I had a decent marriage. Like my wife and I married to my best friend. It was a decent marriage. I felt like I was a decent dad. But as far as actually having deep purpose and meaning, fulfillment, joy, loving the man that I saw in the mirror, being my own best friend, I had to go through a process of a couple things. Number one is I absolutely would attribute divine intervention to it. That day in the mirror, I heard God. I didn't hear him. I felt him in my bones. And he said some things that were very, very clear to me that I will never forget. Again, I didn't hear it. I felt it. But what I felt him speak, and it was like my body was reverberating. He said, buddy, I love you, but I can't fix this for you. You get to decide. You get to commit. You get to become. I am with you and I am for you, but you have to use the head and the heart that I gave you. And man, that shifted so much for me, Chris, because I had become conditioned to believe that in order for my life to get better, everything else around me needed to change. My wife needed to change. My job needed to change. My boss needed to change. The government needed to change. God needed to change. God needed to intervene in my life to help fix the things that I was shirking responsibility for. Because every day I was like, all right, God, take my life, use my life. I want to be a blessing. I want to fulfill my calling, fulfill my purpose. And I lived so far beyond what healthy self-sacrifice should look like, right? Because I believe in self-sacrifice. I believe in giving and serving and loving other people, but it's just like water, right? Too much water and you drown. And I was living in that perpetual, just drowning myself. I'm trying to give and serve to other people. And so with that perspective shift, number one, I had to recognize I needed to take ownership. But number two, I needed help. And that's really where I got introduced to the whole world of coaching, which for me, I attribute to literally helping save my life and get me on a track that helped me learn how to take back control of the chaos in my head and my heart, how to formulate good habits, how to set up boundaries, how to set goals, how to create consistency and discipline, how to become devoted to certain things, to set an aim in life. And that process, and it's a process, it's a process. There was probably about a 2 to 3 year period where I completely reinvented myself. I reclaimed my family. I rediscovered the man that I always wanted to be, to the point where it took probably 2 or 3 years before I could finally look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, David, I love you, man. I actually like you. You're my best friend. Because before that, I hated what I saw, man.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I mean, I feel that first part of that is men, and I fall victim to it as well, is we're not supposed to have issues with depression or anxiety, or we're not supposed to show emotion in that type of way. And I suffer with depression and anxiety myself. I've had some anxiety issues the last several days because of the massive change I decided to make. That's just part of it, and speak openly about that. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine. I'm 6'5". 6'5" guys aren't supposed to have emotional issues. Like we're supposed to just be this, you know what I mean?
I'm 6'2". I'm not too far behind you, bro.
You know what I mean? But it's true, right? Like you're not supposed to have that. You're supposed to just be hardcore here. So I appreciate you sharing that and showing the vulnerability. When you left the corporate job and then decided to go to the coaching way, is that when you connected with Tony Robbins, or?
Yeah, so that was something I was very resistant to, actually, as I was terrified of becoming an entrepreneur, because I had believed that entrepreneurship was the very reason my parents ended up getting divorced. Because as a kid, all I remember my dad was being on call, veterinarian. You live in the Midwest, he's on call all the time, right? He's gone before I woke up. He'd get home when it was dark. He wouldn't be at the majority of my games, right? And as a kid, especially as a young man, like all you want is your dad, man. You just want to be with your dad. And so it was, in retrospect, I understand now that the reason that he was doing that was because of his conditioning and his baggage and his stuff that he hadn't worked through, and stuff that we can go back into history and blame and look and everything like that. I realize now he was doing the best that he could to love me well, but that terrified me because I attributed entrepreneurship to certain divorce. I was like, there is no way I am going to walk that path and ruin this relationship with this incredible woman who is my best friend. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make my kids suffer. And so it actually took a lot of poking and prodding over a period of time with the very first coach that I worked with. She had approached me and she had known that I was in this executive leadership position and was managing sales teams, doing, it sounds like a lot of what you were doing as well. And she said, David, I've got a coaching program that I have to put before my board of directors in about 6 months. I have to have 5 case studies, but it's about a $300,000 coaching program. And I said, I'm sorry, what did you just say? Number one, what is this coaching you're talking about? And number two, who pays that much for whatever it is you're talking about? And she said, I don't expect you to pay it. I know you can't pay it, but I need 5 case studies. And if you will give me 6 months of your life, I would love to help you make the changes that you want to make. And it was through that process that I started to realize that the gifts that I had developed and the things that I believe that God placed inside of me, some of my gifts are multidimensional thinking. I can see multiple perspectives from the exact same time. So I serve really good as a mediator. I'm really good at being able to read people. With the emotional intelligence component of empathy, is that people find it really, really hard to hide stuff from me. Like I can tell when people are lying. I don't let them know all the time because I don't want to cause a ruckus, right? So there's some really weird strengths and gifts that I developed. Again, I don't know. Some of them I believe are nature, but some of them I think were nurtured because of a lot of the stuff that I went through as a kid. And just to go back a little ways too, a big part of what I struggled with in this process and what led into the entrepreneurship was really hard is that when I was about 14, 15 years old, my dad ended up like leaving. He left our home and he moved out. And the man who kind of stepped in as a father figure was a youth pastor at my church. And he sexually violated me. He took advantage of me. And so you have 2 scenarios, one where you feel like your dad abandons you. And then 2, a man who steps in as a father figure who's supposed to protect you, takes advantage of you. My whole construct of the world and what manhood was and what it meant to be a man and what it meant to be an entrepreneur or to succeed in life and fulfillment, it was jacked. It was completely jacked up. And so as we started working through this coaching stuff together, she's asking me questions, man, like I've never even thought about. And I'll never forget, Chris, we had this one day, went to this little Mediterranean restaurant. We're sitting down eating shawarma and a bunch of food I can't pronounce. It was freaking delicious. But she looks at me and she says, David, what do you want? And I was like, well, that's not a loaded question. Like, what do you mean? What do I want? What do I want for lunch? What do I want, in marriage? What do I want out of my life? She's like, what do you want in life? And I remember looking at her and I said, I really don't know. Like, I can tell you everything I don't want. And that's a sidebar, Chris. I find that a lot of men, they don't know what they want. They can just tell you everything they don't want. And she said, well, let me reframe this. She said, who do you want to become? And Chris, when she asked me that question, it broke something inside of me. It's not a revolutionary question. We probably all heard it in some variation or another before. But when she asked me that, she said, who do you want to become? Almost this involuntary, compulsive, just reactionary thing came out of my mouth. I wasn't even thinking, right? It just came out and it was out there. When she said, who do you want to become? I immediately said, I'm not allowed to define that. And she sat back and she looked at me. She said, interesting. Okay. And she paused and she just looked at me for a second. I was like, I don't know where that came from. It just came out of me. Like, I'm not allowed to define that. And through a series of follow-up questions and things like that, I started to realize, Chris, that the overwhelming majority of my life, particularly because of my upbringing in evangelical Christianity and a lot of belief systems that are, you know, there's a lot of good and a lot of not so good. There's you can look in really any segment of society and religion. There's a lot of stuff that breaks down, and it's very, very traumatic and bad and not good. And especially with my history with like that pastor and everything, my worldview, I didn't know what to grab onto. And so if you don't have something to grab onto, that you have a belief system that undergirds everything that you're doing, it's really hard to know who you are because you don't know what you believe. And so when I said I'm not allowed to define that, it was something that really challenged my entire paradigm about life, because I had believed that our job as human beings is to find out why God put us here. That's what I believed. And my entire life had been spent desperately praying, sometimes cursing at him, saying, God, if you freaking cared about me, you would tell me what the hell I'm supposed to do. You would tell me what my calling is, what my purpose is, what I'm supposed to do with this quote unquote gift of life that you've given me. But the problem is that you won't answer me. I know you're here. I know you love me. I believe in you and I believe in Jesus and all this stuff. But what about this life? Is it really I'm just supposed to survive and make it through? And so when she asked me this question, Chris, who do you want to become? And I'm going through, why do I feel like I don't have permission to define this? Is because I had attached to a belief system that said, I'm not allowed to have wants. I'm not allowed to have needs. As a man, I am supposed to live my life and sacrifice to other people. Screw David Waldy. Less of me, more of him, right? It's not my life. I'm supposed to give my life away to other people. I'm supposed to do everything I can to make my wife happy. I'm supposed to do everything I can to make my kids happy. I'm supposed to do everything I can to make my boss happy. And I'm supposed to make everybody happy. That's my job. And so I didn't even have a way to look at this question, Chris, that made sense. And that was the beginning of a process that completely changed everything for me, because I started to realize that the reason that I didn't sense purpose is because I hadn't defined a name in life. The reason I didn't feel like I had meaning and there was no passion and I felt like the life had been sucked out of me was because I had attached to a belief that said, if I define what I want and who I want to become, that's selfish. And I refuse to be selfish. That's how jacked up I was, man.
Yeah, I would say what a mental roadblock for growth. I mean, what a mental roadblock to receive as well. I mean, not just personal growth, but to be able to receive from other people who care about you and believe in you and want you to be more. So after you go through that, then you went to work for Tony Robbins after that. Is that
So after that, so here's where it kind of got interesting. And so for about a 2-year period, I started trying to get businesses off the ground, and I was working after hours, which was really challenging. I mean, I was working full time, 60, 70 hours a week in my corporate job. My wife and I had our first kid. And so basically for about a 6-month stint, I would work from like 9 p.m. until like 2 a.m., which I would not advocate for any of you listening. Probably not advisable. But I was getting 4 hours of sleep a night. I'd wake up at, 6:30 and I would head to work. And that was my life for about 6 months, trying to figure out, how can I develop a business? How can I leverage my skills? How can I help other people? And that had happened because she told me, she said, David, I don't think you understand. If you took your approach to sales and you took this into the marketplace, and you took what you know about business and about marketing and you know about basic behavioral psychology and how people's brains work and your ability to see from different perspectives, if you took this into the marketplace, you would absolutely crush it. You would help businesses grow. You'd change people's lives. You'd be able to make a lot more money, and you'd have a lot more time and freedom for your family and the things that you want. And so for about 2 years, Chris, I tried, man. And I just flip-flopped all over the place, man. You name it, I tried to figure it out. And really the shift for me came when I actually hired and paid for my first coach. I was like, I need to invest in myself. which was freaking terrifying, man. Absolutely terrifying. And this also was a time where I had transitioned out of a commission role in the company into more of a management salaried role. And I had about a $40,000 pay cut, not by my choice. Is another story for another time. But I went through a $40,000 pay cut and immediately thought I should probably invest like 10 grand in myself. That's a great idea, you know? and, and so
it is a great idea, but keep going.
It is a great idea. I'm getting there, man. At the time, though, my construct for how I saw life was like, this is absolutely foolish. In retrospect, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, because we've all talked about those concepts like burning the boats, right? Of saying like, I'm all in, and I'm not advocating that that's universally true for everyone, but for me, what I knew is that I needed guidance. I needed someone to see from a different perspective. I needed someone who could help me to understand what I couldn't see, what I couldn't understand, to give me simple frameworks, to help me develop systems, to help me to actually understand how to build out business for myself. And early on, Chris, that was my biggest struggle with imposter syndrome, because just about anyone could come to me with their business problems and I could help them solve it. But I couldn't solve my own. And I could not figure out. I was like, how in the world can I have all the right answers for everybody else, but not for myself? And so that's when I started to realize, like, we're not meant to do this alone. There's a reason that we really struggle when we're trying to figure it out on our own, and whether it's pride or ego or whatever it is. And so hired my first coach. And then I got my business to a point where I felt comfortable saying, all right, I've got enough clients, I've got enough business, I'm going to take the leap. Now, I wasn't making as much as I had been making in my corporate job, but the day that I turned in my notice, Chris, I turned in my 2-week notice. It was about a month before our second was about to be born. And I'm walking to my truck at 4:57 p.m. Yes, I dipped out a little early that day. So,
we call that Fred Flintstone. We call that Fred Flintstoning, by the way, but go ahead. Because Fred was always the first one out of there. Yeah.
There you go, man. I get a ding on my phone, and it's from Tony Robbins and his team inviting me to join a speaking team that they were putting together for one of his brands. And we were going to be flown out to do speaker training. We were going to be doing some work with a giant launch that was happening, and we were going to be traveling all over speaking and representing Tony and his brands. And that was the beginning of I wasn't employed like a W-2 of his, but it was contract. And so that was really where I got to immerse myself into this whole world that I had been reading about and listening to all the podcasts and reading the books and all the stuff. This was pre, this was before reels and everything were a big deal. It was more like you listen to an audio podcast or you read a book type. And that, I got to have some really, really cool experiences while I was doing that, but I still was building my own business. I ended up formulating another company. I built a partnership. We were doing a bunch of stuff. We built an agency, and fast forward to where we are today. I've been able to create another business that I run two companies right now, and I get to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my family, man. I get to travel around the world. I get to do crazy things with amazing people. And everything that everyone told me about what you're supposed to do to be successful, I stopped listening to them, and I rediscovered who I was and who I wanted to be. And I defined that man, the husband, the father, the leader, the entrepreneur. And it's been a beautiful process, but it was very challenging, very, very challenging, man.
Well, I think that the first part about getting a coach, and I've been coached for a long time. I currently have a personal trainer who helps me with my workouts, keeps me on track with that. Then I have 2 coaches that work on different things. And I also have a guy who helps me, Renee, with all my speaking, and he's kind of a mentor, help me get my keynotes together and my storytelling. And I don't share that with people to make them feel bad if they don't have it. I'm just letting you know that I put myself on this trajectory by reinvesting in myself and putting all the chips on Chris Welton, because I know that when I bet on me, I'm the only one that can lose that bet by not taking the action, right? And the coaches help me stay accountable. And what most people don't realize is getting a coach external from your company that has no skin in the game on what you're doing inside the company, doesn't make them more money, is a super valuable thing to do, because you don't know if they're coaching you in the way that benefits them financially more than it's going to benefit you. I mean, I'm not trying to put like the conspiracy theory out there, but it's true. I've been there, been down that road, and I understand it. So I think it's important that anybody that wants to be a high producer to get in some type of group coaching program or an individual, whatever that looks like. And that's why I had you on today. It's like, I have an abundance mindset. I have coaches on my call all the time, because I'm not for everybody. And there may be somebody on my call who thinks, Chris, you're just a complete idiot, but David's the man, so I'm going to go with David. So I'm totally fine with that, right? Like, there's so much out there. And I think that the coaches that don't buy into that, are trying to get all the market or whatever, are really limiting themselves to more opportunities. When you left the role, the corporate job, and this is me saying this, asking this question now, because for me personally, because I just did this, the struggle I've had the last 15 days, I feel like I've lost my identity to a certain extent, right? I had this super high level job, all these people reporting to me, my phone blowing up all the time, text messages needing help. I'm not getting text messages anymore. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, so that's been a little bit of a struggle. I feel like I've lost my identity a little bit. Now, I wanted to lose my identity. I wanted to not get those calls, but I was almost addicted to the chaos. Like, did you have the same issues when you changed careers?
100%, man. And I think that what happens is that, we talk about this term is like high functioning anxiety, right? You oftentimes find in high performance, high stress scenarios where everyone's got high functioning anxiety for some degree. And what I realized is that if you look at it through the frame of just basic neurochemicals, and Andrew Huberman has a ton of stuff on this, absolutely fantastic to listen to if you want to understand just hormones and neurochemicals and how they affect our bodies, is that you effectively, a great example he uses is like how insulin works, right? And how when you've got the elevation of insulin and it stays elevated for so long, your body creates a new baseline. Now, this is just a theory of mine, but I believe that the same thing can happen with anxiety, is that if you've operated with anxiety for so long, you create a brand new baseline. And anytime that you come beneath that threshold and you actually experience peace, it terrifies you, because it is so uncommon and so foreign. It actually exacerbates the anxiety, because you're like, I should be stressed about something right now and I'm not, so I'm going to be stressed. That's it. Like, I should have a reason to be freaking out right now, and I don't. Like, if I objectively look, I don't have any reason. And because of that, I'm going to feel anxious.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, it's just like someone who unfortunately has bad luck consistently, then they don't understand what it feels like to win. So all they realize is it feels like to lose, and that's their baseline. Well, I'm going to lose again. Like, I'm going to have a hard time again, or it's going to fail. Like, so I agree with that. And that's been a struggle. And I actually had my coaching call with my coach before my doctor's appointment today. So like, it was just like back to back to back, and we were talking about that because he prepared me for it. He's like, he sold a bunch of his businesses when he went full time to open the coaching business. And he's like, you need to be aware of this, this, and this. And I was like, oh, I'll be fine. And he just like nailed it to what I was going to go through. And that's been the toughest part so far, because I gave myself a really big runway to build out my company. I mean, I already had a decent amount of coaching clients, and I've got other things. And when we get off here, I'll talk to you about farming, because my family owns 3 farms in Kansas. So we'll talk about that when we get off here, because I know that's where you're from. But my biggest supporter though has been my wife, right? She's been the one behind it. And I decided to do this about November last year. My flight was delayed for 9 hours because there was a hurricane in Florida. I was trying to get back from an event I was speaking at in Charleston, and I had 9 hours. So I literally got up my journal and started doing all my stuff for the next year, for 2023. And I said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I just started that day instead of waiting until January 1st. So when I told her I was ready to go, she's like, let's go. What are you waiting on? And she's like, I will sleep under a bridge with you if that's what we got to do for you to feel successful.
That right there. Can we pause on that for a second? I will.
Yeah.
I just have to interject this. Like, this is so weird, Chris, that literally everything that you're describing, and because I want to encourage those listening, is that if you try and make this significant of a change and you do not have a healthy relationship with your spouse, I want to caution you with the biggest freaking red caution flag that exists. Because if it were not for my wife, and she said the exact same thing, and I'm going to try not to, get too emotional here, but I will never forget sitting in the living room on the couch. She said those exact same words. She said, I believe in you. You do what you need to do. But even if we lose everything, we end up under a bridge. I'm with you. And man, dude, for a guy, there is nothing like that of being like, okay, even if it all goes to shit, I know that she trusts me and she believes in me, and I'm scared out of my mind, but I'm going to do this because I believe that I'm supposed to do this.
It's so hard for a guy to even accept that, because our value, our self-value is how much money we make. And I don't care whoever, like really as a man, for me, it was like, okay, how much money am I making? All right. So that's where my value is. How can I support my family financially? Or how can I do all these things to protect my family? And then when you have somebody who loves you and cares about you that much that they step in and say, no, it's not just you. It's us, dude. It's us. We're going at this together. And I'm like, how can I fail now? Like there's no way. I've got the best support team I can get. And when I was on the call with my coach earlier, we were talking about some stuff and some things I brought up that I struggled with. I was always the guy that could make the team. Even as an amputee, I could make the sports team. I was a good athlete. But once I made the team, I was like, I made the team. And I wouldn't work as hard. That's just who I was. And then I find myself doing that in some things in life. And my coach shuts me down today and he says, the goal now is to make the all-star team. You made the team. You left your job. You're doing all the things you're going to do. Let's talk about the people you've had conversations with in the last week. And we named all these people that are super high level, way above me, that I've reached out to and connected with. Like I'm working out with Ben Newman tomorrow morning at 5:30. He messaged me last week. Hey, I'm going to be in Orlando, Welton. You want to work out? So 5:30 in the morning, I'm going to be with him working out. So he said, is that your all-star team? Is that what you need to get to the all-star game? I said, yes, because I'm still the cheapest house on the block with that group of guys. Like I'm way far behind where they are. He said, then leverage it. You like ask them, what do I need to do to get the opportunity to be on stage with you? What do I need to do differently to get to introductions? Like ask the questions. Most people don't ask them that. They're afraid to ask them. So I'm just curious with the Tony Robbins piece. Obviously, Tony Robbins' name is massive. I love Tony. I mean, like when I drove my car today with the top down, I had that same exact hat on. That's my hat I always wear.
Come on.
Yeah, same exact hat.
They're lucky, baby.
Like I've got probably, well, they're not in here, but there's probably 5 of them out there. There's 2 in my truck when I just drove. There's actually a black one sitting over there on the chair. But how was that? I mean, how did you were able to leverage? I mean, I'm sure that's helped a ton, right? I mean, being a part of a Tony Robbins, I mean, that's like coaching for Nick Saban, right? Like that's like being an assistant coach for Nick Saban. Like here's the door, right? I mean, tons of opportunity.
So for me, I think probably the biggest lesson that I learned during that season, Chris, because we were involved with him, the second company that I started the partnership, we ended up getting to do some consulting work as well, which was a whole different ball game, which was a lot of fun. But being in that world, what it taught me more than anything is that the people that are truly successful and fulfilled, and I want everyone to hear me when I say this, they model greatness, they don't idolize it. They model greatness, they don't idolize it. And I think that there are a lot of people that look at a Chris Welton, or they look at a Tony Robbins, or they look at a Andy Frisella, they look at an Ed Milet, they look at these people and they get so swept up in the idolization of that individual that they lose their ability to be fully authentically themselves. And what I love about Tony is that he is fully authentically himself. Did he model Jim Rohn and learn a lot of things? 100%, but he didn't try and be Jim Rohn. He didn't try and be anybody but who he was. And the biggest lesson I think that I learned is recognizing that those individuals that we admire and look up to, is that you will start to see yourself as an equal to those individuals when you stop idolizing them and thinking that you're intrinsically inferior because of their station, their status, their money, their wealth, whatever it is, right? Which I think a lot of us guys struggle with, is that we have this hierarchy is like, oh, you're making 2 million a year. Well, I'm making 10, or I'm making 50, or I'm making, whatever. It's like, and then there's a lot of guys that internalize shame based on where they're at financially. And it's because there's this idolization that somehow Chris is intrinsically better than me. And it's not that they're intrinsically better. It's that they are better than you in certain areas. And those are the areas you should model. But as a human being, Tony Robbins is a human being. He goes pee. He takes a poop. He does he says stupid things. And that for me was really freeing, because I stopped looking at people in high ranking areas. I stopped idolizing them. I want to model, the ones that share values, and I respect them, but I'm not in that position where I used to be, where it's like fanboy. It's like, oh my God, it's Tony Robbins. You gotta be kidding me.
That is so powerful, because you're right. Like I look at it like this. Yes, Chris, I am better at you than being Chris. I'm a better Chris than you're going to be, right? And I want to be the best Chris. And I told somebody that the other day. I was on a podcast and I said, look, I get a little bit of stuff from Ed Milet, a little bit of stuff from Andy and Renee Rodriguez and Ben Newman. And then I figure out what pieces that I need to put together to be the best version of Chris as possible. But I also look at people and see what's possible. Like, I love to see people and hear stories. Like, I love documentaries. Like, I love documentary about the guy who lost it all and got it back. Like, I even like the Johnny Manziel documentary. Like, it was so powerful. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Like, I have some respect for Johnny Manziel. He was a hustler businessman in college. He got screwed over. He made some bad decisions, but he got screwed over. But I look at those things and I go, what lesson can I learn from them to be a better version of myself? Not to go be Johnny Manziel, not to go be Kobe Bryant, not to go be LeBron James. It's what little things do they do? Oh, well, that's possible to do that. It's possible if you put in enough work, make enough phone calls, follow up with enough people, take action consistently, you can get where you want to go. Like, there's no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, David. So, I want to share this final thought that I think will be really useful. And I don't mean to end us here, but I do need to jump here in just a sec. I've got another commitment I got to get to, but everyone talks about comparison as the thief of joy. Have you ever heard that one? Yes.
The problem with that is that there's zero context, because comparison can be the thief of joy. Comparison can also help you become everything that you were created to be. The problem is that most people, they take this frame and this approach that when they compare to other people, they internalize it and feel inferior. They feel less than. They become envious. They look at other people's lives, their lifestyle, their marriage, their health, or whatever. And like, oh, I don't have that. That's not me. It must be nice. I hope I could get there one day. It's a victim mindset, right? Versus comparison, like we're talking about, is looking at these individuals and saying, okay, where in my life, right? Because I look at this individual and they've been married for 60 years. Why? How? What do they know that I need to know? I need to compare myself to them to be inspired, to be challenged, to grow. And I think that's one of the things that our society is missing right now, Chris, is that everyone's so scared of looking in the mirror and directly confronting the things and saying, okay, who can I look at in my life that has achieved a degree of success in different areas, but also who in my life can I look at and say, they are absolutely on fire for life. They're filled with joy. They're filled with laughter. They're filled with love. They have a great time. Yeah, they're serious in different, but they wear all the hats well. They don't wear masks, but they wear all the hats really, really, really well, because it's only in that healthy comparison, I believe, that we can be inspired and encouraged, just like every athlete. And I love what you said about coaching as well. I'm the same way, man. Is that I see it all as like, hey, we're all in the NFL. Are we all going to go to the Super Bowl? No, but at the end of the day, we're playing at the pro level. Our goal is to create friendly, healthy competition. So why? We can all get better. I'm going to run the tape. I'm going to watch the tape. I'm going to read the plays. I'm going to look. I'm going to try and find every single way. But it's a different approach to competition that most people don't have, because most people are playing a zero-sum game. And they believe if they win, I lose. Or if I win, they lose. Instead of saying, no, life is not a zero-sum game. We're talking about 400 billion men on this planet, and the majority of them are not working with coaches. There's enough people to serve. Whether you're a coach, a consultant, you run an agency, you own your own business, you're in a 9-to-5, only take competition through the frame of competition should help you and make you be better, be inspired to push the bounds, not to operate from a victim mindset or scarcity.
Yeah, that is powerful beyond words, and it's iron sharpens iron, and for me, the comparison part of it, I get the thief. You know, it is the thief of joy if you go, oh, why don't I have that? But I'm always the guy going, dude, look what David did, right? Like, look at David. Have you seen this guy's new jet? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's, to me, that's like, I'm excited for them to win, right? So why would I be upset that they won? Because what happens? It's possible. That means it's possible for Chris to do what he wants to do, right? So, no, I love that, man. I love that. It's super powerful. And I know you had another engagement to get to, but what's the best way to connect with you if people want to reach out? And I'll put everything in the show notes as well. But what's the best way to connect?
For sure. So honestly, best way to connect with me right now is on Instagram, man. Like, if you message me on any other platform, I probably won't see it. I'm really responsive on Instagram. I manage it all myself. You can email me, check out my website, davidwaldy.com. But yeah, I really am intentional to create conversations with people. I can't promise you I'm going to get back to you immediately. Might be a few days or a couple of weeks, but I will respond, and it will be me. And I love meeting people and just creating ways to create synergies and support and encourage. And so if anyone wants to connect, hit me up. Shoot me a message on Instagram at David Waldy.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's in the show notes and have everything out there for everybody that does want to connect with David. Dude, thanks for taking the time out, and I truly appreciate you being a guest on the One Hand at a Time podcast.
Chris, it was an honor, brother. Thank you for your time, man.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the One Hand at a Time podcast today. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share. I'm often asked if I'm available for speaking opportunities or accepting new coaching clients. The answer is yes. Feel free to click the Calendly link in the show notes to set up a 30-minute call with myself. And remember, as we move forward in life, we do it one hand at a time.